It started on the kind of day when the clouds felt heavier than the ground. The air had that strange metallic taste that makes you think a storm is coming, though the sky was stubbornly dry. I was sitting at my usual table outside the old food truck by the train yard, watching freighters idle under rusting cranes. My fries had gone cold in the paper tray, the oil leaving translucent stains that clung to my fingers. I was halfway through mindlessly eating them when I noticed the small thin, barely taller than a child, staggering between the gaps in the stacked shipping containers. At first, I thought she was lost. Then I saw how she moved, jerking, slightly as if unused to the rhythm of her own body. Her skin shimmered faintly under the shadow of the containers, a shade that wasn't quite blue, wasn't quite silver, and her hair clung to her in wisps that didn't obey the breeze. I remember thinking she must be wearing some sort of costume, maybe for a shoot or a cosplay gathering. But when she stumbled close enough for me to see her eyes, the thought died instantly. They weren't the eyes of any human, wide, luminous layers of shifting light like a liquid sunrise. She looked at my fries as if they were a treasure, then at me with an expression that was both desperate and cautious, like a wild animal deciding whether the trap was worth the bait. I didn't think. I just held the tray out to her. The movement made her flinch, but the scent must have been too strong for her to resist. She took one fryingly, one and bit into it carefully. Something happened in her expression, something that made her posture change from defensive to protective, oddly enough, as though this small act bound us. She ate the rest slowly, watching me with unbroken intensity. The world seemed to narrow to the space between us, the drone of the freight yard fading into the background. That was when I heard Italo, almost subsonic hum, not from her, but from somewhere behind the containers she had come from. It was a sound that vibrated in my bones, a sound that made every hair on my arms rise. She stiffened, dropped the tray, and moved in front of me with sudden purpose. Her head tilted toward the noise, her body angled to shield me. I had no idea what she was, but something told me the moment I gave her those fries. I had stepped into a world that would not let me go quietly. The sound grew deeper, pulsing like the slow beat of some colossal heart hidden behind steel walls. The girl, if I could still call her, that lowered herself into a crouch, shoulders tense, her gaze fixed on the narrow gap between two containers. I caught the faintest glimpse of movement there, something sinuous and pale, sliding low to the ground. My mind scrambled to make sense of a stray dog, maybe a piece of tarp caught in the wind. But the way it moved wasn't like anything I'd ever seen. It was purposeful, deliberate, like it knew exactly where we were. My hands were damp against the table's edge, and every instinct told me to run, yet my legs refused to obey. The girl shifted her stance, one hand raised slightly as if to warn me back. Her fingers spread, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw faint streaks of light tracing the lines of her veins. The humming deepened again, joined by a whispering scrape against the asphalt. Then, from the gap, a shape emerged along, jointed in ways that didn't look stable, its surface glistening like wet stone. Where a face should have been, there was only a smooth, ridged expanse that pulsed faintly with each beat of that hum. The air around it felt heavier, as though the oxygen had been thinned out. My lungs worked harder just to draw a breath. The creature paused, angling its headless form toward us, and I swear I felt its attention, not as sight, but as pressure, a weight against my mind. The girl's posture tightened. Without taking her eyes from the thing, she stepped back until her shoulder touched my leg. It was a strange gesture, almost like a tether to keep me close, or to keep me from bolting. The creature took one slow, deliberate step closer. That was when she moved. It wasn't speed like a human sprinting. It was more like she simply ceased to exist in one place and reappeared in another, a blur that defied my ability to track her. Her hands struck the creature's surface with a dull, resonant crack, and a flare of light burst outward from the point of impact. The thing recoiled, twisting in on itself with a guttural vibration that rattled the bolts in the nearby shipping container walls. She didn't let it recover. She pressed forward, each strike accompanied by that strange light, each movement flowing like she'd been born for this kind of fight. I stood frozen, unsure if I should run or help, though what help I could possibly offer was beyond me. The fight lasted only seconds, but each moment stretched unbearably long. Finally, the creature collapsed inward, its body folding like paper until it was nothing more than a dark smear against the ground. The hum faded, replaced by the ringing in my ears. She turned back to me, breathing steadily, her glowing eyes locking on mine. There was no smile, no sign of triumph, only a silent question in her gaze, as if she were trying to decide whether I understood the cost of what had just happened. I didn't, not then. But I knew one thing for certain: whatever had come looking for her would not stop with just one. The smear on the asphalt where the creature had collapsed was already fading, dissolving into the air like smoke caught in an invisible wind. I stared, waiting for something else to happen, for some final movement that would confirm it was truly gone. But the girl didn't relax. Her gaze swept the alley between containers, then shifted upward, scanning the rusted catwalks above. It was then I realized the hum had not fully stopped. Faint now, yes, but still there, a distant echo that slid under the skin like static. My stomach tightened. Whatever had come after her hadn't been alone. She moved suddenly, grabbing my wrist, with a strength that shocked me. Her hand was small, the bones fine, but the grip was unyielding. She tugged, urging me away from the table, away from the yard, her head turning often to scan every shadow. I stumbled at first, struggling to match her pace as she darted between the containers. Her steps made no sound, but mine rang too loudly in my ears, every scuff of my shoes feeling like it would give us away. The air grew colder the deeper we went into the maze of steel walls, the smell of oil and rust mixing with something acrid, almost electrical. The hum grew sharper, joined by a sound like glass cracking in slow motion. I looked up. Across the tops of the containers, pale shapes moved, 3 of them keeping pace with us, their bodies flexing in impossible arcs as they flowed over the rusted metal. I caught glimpses of those smooth, ridged faces, each one featureless and yet somehow aware, tracking us like predators closing in. The girl pulled harder, turning down a narrow path barely wide enough for the 2 of us. I heard the clatter of something landing on the container above us, the impact reverberating through the steel dot. We emerged into a wider space, an open section of the yard where stacks of containers gave way to an abandoned loading dock. The girl stopped abruptly, releasing my wrist. Her head tilted slightly, as if listening for something only she could hear. A faint flicker of light traced along the veins in her neck and arms, growing brighter with each breath she took. Without warning, she stepped in front of me again, planting herself between me and the shadows. The pale shapes dropped from the top of the containers one by one, their landing silent despite their size. They fanned out, blocking every path of escape. The hum grew into a low, resonant chord that made my teeth ache. One of the creatures advanced, the ridged expanse of its head shifting faintly, almost like a ripple across water. The girl moved. To meet it, her stance low, every muscle coiled. I realized she wasn't just protecting me, she was preparing for a fight she might not win. The others began to circle, and for the first time, I felt the weight of a thought I didn't want to believe. They weren't here for her alone. They had seen me, too. The cold pressed in like invisible walls, and the hum had grown so deep it rattled through my bones. The three creatures moved as one, their limbs unfolding in ways that seemed to defy anatomy, their jointed legs bending forward and sideways in the same motion. Each step was slow but deliberate, the kind of pace predators used when they knew their prey had nowhere left to run. The girl's light grew brighter now, tracing her from collarbone to fingertips in living lines that pulsed like a heartbeat. She was breathing differently, slow and even, like she was preparing to leap into freezing water. The first creature lunged, and she met it halfway. Her body blurred, but I could still see the strike her palm connecting with its side, a flare of white light bursting outward like shattered glass made of sunlight. The thing recoiled, its form twisting violently before it collapsed into a smear like the one I'd seen earlier. The other two didn't hesitate. They surged forward together. She spun to meet them, her movements impossibly fluid, her limbs bending farther than any humans could without breaking. One creature's leg lashed out, catching her mid-step, and for the first time she faltered, stumbling backward toward me. Without thinking, I grabbed a length of rusted pipe lying by. The dock. It felt laughably useless against these things, but adrenaline doesn't care about logic. One of the pale predators closed in on her exposed side, and I swung with all my strength. The impact rang through my arms with a metallic clang, the pipe vibrating so hard it nearly slipped from my hands. The creature staggered, not much, but enough for her to recover. The vibration underfoot became more distinct with each step, a deep, steady pulse that seemed to come from far below the ground. The girl moved quickly now, no longer cautious but purposeful, her glowing eyes locked on some unseen landmark ahead. We turned down a corridor between two leaning stacks of containers, the rusted walls towering high above and narrowing until my shoulders brushed the metal. The light faded almost completely here, swallowed by shadow, yet her skin's faint glow traced the path forward like a living lantern. The air grew cooler, and the smell of rust shifted into something sharper, almost sterile, like hospital disinfectant. That was wrong. There were no working facilities here, not for years. The dockyard had been abandoned to decay long before I started coming here. For cheap lunches. She stopped suddenly before what looked like a normal wall of dented steel. Her fingers brushed across a section of it, tracing a pattern that shimmered faintly under her touch. The metal responded not with a sound, but with a ripple that spread outward in perfect circles, like she'd touched the surface of water. The ripple passed through the wall, and a seam I hadn't noticed before split open, the steel sliding apart soundlessly to reveal a narrow stairwell leading down into darkness. The vibration was louder now, rising through the steps, a mechanical heartbeat in the earth. She glanced back at me, holding my gaze for a moment, and I knew this was a choice. I could turn around, walk away, pretend none of this had happened, but something in her expression, something almost pleading, pulled me forward. I stepped after her into the stairwell. The wall slid shut behind us, sealing with the same water-like ripple. The descent was steep, and the air grew warmer the deeper we went. The sound of our footsteps echoed strangely, as if the stairwell weren't entirely solid. The walls were smooth, not rusted like the dockyard steel, but polished, patterned faintly with geometric lines that seemed to shift if I looked at them too long. Her hand brushed these lines occasionally, each touch producing a faint flicker of light that faded into the metal. At the bottom, the stairs opened into a vast chamber. The ceiling was lost in shadow, but the floor stretched out in smooth, curved tiers leading to a massive circular platform at the center. The entire space pulsed faintly with the same rhythm as the vibration underfoot. On the platform stood a structure half machine, half sculpture, its surface a web of flowing lines that glowed with a soft, shifting light. I couldn't tell if it was built from metal or grown from some living material. The girl walked toward it without hesitation, placing her palm against one of the glowing lines. The entire structure responded, light rippling outward from her touch until the chamber itself seemed to breathe. Then the air filled with a sound low and resonant, not unlike the hum of the creatures, but layered, warmer, almost like a voice too deep for words. She closed her eyes, her expression calm for the first time since I'd met her. That calm didn't last. Somewhere above us, faint but unmistakable, came a new vibration, lighter, faster, and growing steadily louder. The sound of many limbs, moving in unison. She opened her eyes, the glow in them brightening sharply. Without turning, she reached back and gripped my wrist again. Her touch was firm, and though she didn't speak, I understood. They had found us. The vibration from above sharpened into a staccato rhythm, the sound of something fast, many-legged, and relentless descending through the dockyard above. The girl's glow brightened as she moved, guiding me toward the massive structure in the chamber's center. Up close, the thing was even stranger. Its flowing lines weren't carved or welded, but seemed to pulse like veins, carrying some faint, liquid light beneath the surface. My hand hovered near it without touching, but I could feel a faint warmth radiating from it, a heartbeat that wasn't mine. She placed her palm fully against it, and the floor around the platform lit up in a widening circle. Patterns I hadn't noticed before sprang to life beneath my feet, concentric rings of symbols that shifted when I tried to focus on them. The air grew heavy, tinged with the same sterile scent I'd smelled in the stairwell, and the structure began to emit a deeper, layered hum that resonated in my chest. The sound from above grew louder, now accompanied by a faint scraping like claws against metal. I glanced up and saw movement in the shadows near the chamber's high ceiling, narrow vertical slits opening in the walls, releasing thin beams of light that danced in the swirling dust. Through one of them, I caught the glint of something pale and ridged moving fast. The creatures had found an entrance. The girl stepped between me and the slits without hesitation, her shoulders squared, her light intensifying until it painted the nearest tier of the chamber in ghostly white. The first creature dropped through one of the openings, landing in a crouch that made no sound. Its featureless head turned toward us, ridges shifting faintly in patterns I couldn't read. It didn't move immediately, just studied us. Then, as if on a signal, two more dropped in behind it. Her glow flared. She moved before I could even register the shift, one fluid motion that took her across the chamber in a heartbeat. She struck the first creature square in the chest, light bursting from her hands in a sharp wave that made the air crackle. It recoiled but didn't dissolve like the ones before. The other two moved in, forcing her to pivot, striking one while evading the sweeping limb of another. Their speed was wrong, too fast to track, yet deliberate, coordinated. I backed toward the structure's base, gripping the rusted pipe I'd carried all this way like it could make a difference. The hum from the structure deepened, and I felt a faint pressure at the base of my skull. A thought alien but unmistakable slid into my mind. "You are marked." My heart slammed against my ribs. It wasn't my imagination. Something down here, maybe the structure itself, knew I was part of this. A shadow passed over me. I looked up just in time to see a fourth creature drop through the ceiling slit, landing between me and the girl. Its head angled toward me, ridges shifting in a ripple that felt like recognition. The hum from the structure spiked, and in that instant the girl broke away from the others, moving so fast her image blurred. She slammed into the new arrival before it could reach me, the impact echoing through the chamber like a thunderclap. Light exploded outward, and for a heartbeat everything was pure white. When my vision cleared, the creature was gone, but more were dropping in from above. The chamber was becoming a trap. And from the way the girl's stance shifted, the set of her shoulders, and the flicker of her light, I understood something I hadn't before. She wasn't fighting to win anymore. She was fighting to buy us time. The chamber was filling with motion-pale bodies dropping from the ceiling slits, their jointed limbs unfolding in sharp, deliberate movements. The girl's light lashed through the darkness, each strike bursting into white arcs that sent shockwaves across the smooth floor. But for every creature she felled, another took its place. The hum from the massive structure behind me deepened. Again, so low, it felt like my heartbeat was sinking to it. The sensation was wrong, like I wasn't just standing near it, but tethered to it. A flicker of movement at the edge of my vision made me turn. One of the creatures had bypassed her, entirely, flowing along the curved wall like a spider on glass. It dropped toward me in a blur. An instinct, not thought, moved me. I swung the pipe upward, connecting with a ringing metallic crack. The impact jarred my arms to the shoulders, but the thing's momentum faltered, buying me half a second before it lunged again. That was enough for her to intercept. She appeared between us in a flash, both hands striking the creature's torso. Her light erupting so bright I saw the bones in my own hands through the skin. The thing convulsed and dissolved into the familiar, drifting haze. She didn't pause. Her hand clamped around my wrist again, grip unyielding, and she pulled me toward the far side of the platform. I stumbled to keep up, the floor beneath us shifting subtly as though reacting to her movement. A section of the curved wall ahead rippled, then split open, revealing another stairwell narrower, steeper, descending into absolute black. She shoved me toward it with surprising force before following and sealing the wall behind us. The stairwell was silent except for our breathing and the faint thud of my shoes against the smooth steps. The mechanical heartbeat I'd felt above was stronger here, almost a constant pressure in the air. The girl's glow dimmed slightly, enough to keep us hidden but still lighting the path. We moved quickly, the descent feeling endless, the air growing warmer until sweat ran down my back at last. The stairs opened into another chamber, but this one was different. It was smaller, circular, with walls that seemed almost organic, curved inward like the inside of a vast shell. The floor sloped toward a recessed basin at the center, and in that basin was something that made my skin prickle. A second structure, smaller but nearly identical to the one above, its flowing lines, glowing with a softer, steadier light. Unlike the other, this one felt alive. She led me to the edge of the basin and released my wrist for the first time since the fight began. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes locked on mine in a way that felt like a question and an answer all at once. Then she stepped into the basin, placed both palms on the structure, and the glow surged outward, not just through it, but into the walls, the floor, even the air. The air inside the shell-like chamber felt heavier now, charged with a static that raised every hair on my arms. The girl kept both hands on the smaller structure, her light flowing into it in steady pulses, each one answered by a deeper glow. From within, the rhythmic beat that matched my heart didn't fade instead. It grew stronger, almost insistent, as though the structure was syncing itself to me deliberately. I stepped closer, hesitant, but the warmth radiating from it pulled me in despite the unease crawling under my skin. Somewhere far above, a sound like metal tearing apart echoed down through the hidden corridors we'd descended. It was followed by a low, layered tone that didn't belong to the smaller creatures. This sound wasn't just heard, it was felt, deep in the bones, a vibration too vast to fully comprehend. It wasn't hunting us like the others. It was announcing itself, letting us know it was coming, confident in the inevitability of its arrival. The girl turned her head sharply, her glowing eyes locking on mine. For the first time, I thought I saw fear not of the creatures, but of whatever was making that sound. She stepped back from the structure and moved to me quickly, pressing, her palm flat against my chest. The warmth from her touch seeped through me, and for a brief moment, the glow in her skin spread into mine, tracing faint lines under my flesh. My breath caught not from pain, but from a strange sense of being recognized. The structure responded. Instantly, its light shifting to the same pale hue that pulsed through me now. Symbols etched into its surface rearranged themselves, aligning into a spiral pattern that seemed to spin slowly even though the metal didn't move. A low chime filled the air, pure and crystalline, cutting through the weight of the other vibrations. Then, as suddenly as it began, the chime stopped, and I felt something ripple outward, an invisible wave passing through the walls and vanishing into the earth. The girl stepped back, watching me closely, her expression unreadable. I didn't understand what had just happened, but the pressure in my skull told me it hadn't been nothing. Somewhere above, the tearing metal sound ceased, replaced by silence so deep it made my ears ring. And then 3 sharp pulses in the air, like the aftershocks of a distant explosion. Whatever she had done through me, it had been noticed. I glanced toward the stairwell we'd come from. No sound yet, but I could feel them, the smaller creatures still moving above us. They hadn't stopped the hunt. And now something else, something older and larger, knew exactly where we were. The girl moved to the structure again, her hands hovering but not touching it. She looked at me one last time, then toward the stairwell, and in that instant I knew. She was deciding whether to keep me here or send me away. The silence above us didn't last. A deep, rolling pressure began to build in the air, as though the ground itself was holding its breath. Dust drifted down from the stairwell opening, in slow spirals, and the girl stiffened, her head tilting toward the sound only she seemed able to hear. Then it came, a single, deliberate impact from somewhere far above, so heavy the walls of the chamber flexed inwards like the ribs of a living thing. The shockwave rippled through the floor, through me, and into the smaller structure, which flared brightly in answer. The girl's light surged too, brighter than before, but there was no triumph in her stance, only grim preparation. She stepped into the basin again, touching the structure with both hands. The spiral pattern on its surface rotated faster, the glow intensifying until it painted the curved walls in shifting light. A hum rose from it, not like the mechanical heartbeat from before, but layered and melodic, almost like a voice. And for the first time since this began, I could hear words not in my ears, but directly in my mind. You carry the mark. The voice was vast, impersonal, and yet it knew me. I stumbled back, my pulse racing. I didn't answer, didn't even know how, but the voice didn't wait. They will not take you. You are not theirs to claim. The girl's gaze snapped toward me, as though she knew exactly what I was hearing. Her eyes were intense now, urgent. She released the structure, moved to me, and placed her hand over my heart again. The glow spread from her touch into me once more, but this time it didn't stop. It poured through my veins, racing to my fingertips, pooling behind my eyes until the chamber around me blurred into light and shadow. And then I saw it. Not the girl, not the creatures, but the thing above us. It was vast, too large to fit into the space I tried to imagine for it, its form folding and unfolding like a living fractal. Its surface was smooth and pale like the smaller predators, but it shifted constantly, its ridges rearranging in patterns that felt uncomfortably like language. It wasn't moving toward us in a straight line, it was descending, curling through hidden passages in the earth like a great white serpent made of bone and light. And in its shifting surface, I saw something else, reflections of places I had never been, cities swallowed by fire, oceans frozen under alien moons, the faces of people I didn't know but felt I should. The vision broke as the chamber trembled again. Dust and debris rained from the ceiling, and a deep fissure cracked through the wall above the stairwell. The sound of many limbs echoed down the steps. The smaller creatures had found the way in, and behind them that vast presence was drawing closer with terrible patience. The girl took my wrist, pulling me toward the far curve of the wall. Her hand brushed the smooth surface and it rippled, opening into yet another passage, this one narrower, sloping downward into darkness so complete it seemed to swallow the light from her skin. She didn't hesitate, and her grip told me neither. Should I, as we stepped inside, the wall sealed behind us, cutting off the sight of the chamber, but not the sound. The hum of the structure faded, replaced by the echo of the voice still in my mind. You cannot run from it forever. The tunnel sloped, sharply downward, far steeper than the stairwell we'd used before. The floor wasn't stone, it was smooth, almost soft under my boots, giving slightly with each step as though it was some kind of living material. The air was colder here, heavy with the metallic temps that coated the back of my throat. I glanced behind us, half expecting to see the wall dissolve again and those pale-limbed things pouring through, but nothing moved. Still, the sense of being hunted didn't fade. It deepened. The girl moved quickly but not frantically, each step purposeful, as though she knew exactly where this twisting passage would lead. The glow from her skin barely reached the ceiling, it arched high above us in places, vanishing into shadow. Every so often, strange shapes drifted in the darkness overhead, slender, translucent things that moved with slow, deliberate grace, as if watching. None came closer. The further we went, the more the walls began to change. At first they were seamless and smooth. Then faint patterns began to emerge, grooves and spirals like the markings on the basin, etched in fluid lines that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. They pulsed faintly, in rhythm with the girl's glow, as though reacting to her presence. I wanted to speak, ask where we were going, what this mark on me meant, but my voice felt wrong in this place, like a sound that would be noticed by something I didn't want to notice us. So I kept moving, listening to the silence that wasn't really silence at all. Underneath the faint hum of the walls, I could still feel the residue of that voice from before, pressed like a fingerprint. into my thoughts. The tunnel widened suddenly, spilling us into a cavern so large it took me a moment to realize we were still indoors. The walls here were jagged, uneven, not the perfect curves of the upper levels. And in the center of the space rose something I couldn't have imagined. A massive, vertical shape, like a shard of dark crystal, half buried in the floor, its surface fractured and glinting with faint light from within. Thin streams of that light ran along the cracks, spiderwebbing across the floor toward the walls like veins. The girl approached it with a kind of reverence, releasing my wrist for the first time since we'd fled. She pressed her palm against one of the glowing cracks. The crystal responded immediately. The veins on the floor brightened, the entire cavern humming in resonance. I stepped back, unsettled by the sudden intensity, and then the voice returned, louder, clearer, but different. This time, you were not meant to come here. The words didn't come from the crystal or from the air. They came from inside my head, but sharper, like they were being carved there rather than spoken. I staggered, clutching my temples, and an image bloomed in my vision, unbidden, the same vast fractal thing I'd seen before, but now its shifting surface was filled with symbols, some alien, some human, some that looked like twisted versions of letters I recognized. You are altered. That is why they want you. That is why she hides you. The girl turned toward me suddenly, as if she'd heard the same message, but there was something in her eyes, now hesitation, maybe even doubt. Before I could speak, before I could ask the questions burning in my chest, the cavern floor trembled. A deep cracking sound echoed from far above, followed by a thin, piercing wail that didn't belong to any human throat. They'd found us again. The wail from above didn't stop, it built, rising into a pitch that made my teeth ache. Chunks of stone and dust rained from the cavern ceiling. Somewhere in that endless black above, things were moving fast. The girl darted toward me, her glow intensifying until it hurt to look at her directly. She didn't speak, just grabbed my wrist again and pulled my palm toward the cracked crystal. I didn't understand why until my skin touched it. A shock tore through me, hot and cold all at once. My knees buckled, but I couldn't pull away. The crystal had locked me in, its light flooding up my arm like liquid fire. I felt the mark on my chest ignite, burning so fiercely I thought it might sear through skin and bone. The hum of the cavern rose to a roar. The veins of light in the floor blazed, racing outward and climbing the jagged walls until they touched the ceiling. The patterns there twisted and flexed as though the entire cavern were alive. Then the first of the pale-limbed creatures dropped from the darkness above. It landed without a sound, its black eyes locking on me. More followed, sliding down the walls in impossible, spider-like motions. Their limbs bent the wrong way, their thin bodies folding and unfolding as they spread out. Surrounding us, the girl stepped between me and them, raising her hands. Her glow formed a shimmering barrier in the air, a faint, translucent curve of light. The first creature lunged, slamming into it with enough force to send ripples through the shield. It rebounded, but I saw cracks form in the light. She wouldn't be able to hold them for long. The mark pulsed again, harder this time, almost painful. I didn't know what to do, but instinct or maybe something else took over. I pressed my other hand against the crystal and let the heat in my chest flow outward. The cavern reacted instantly. Light shot from the crystal into the floor veins, then erupted upward in jagged columns around us. The creatures shrieked not in fear, but in rage and charged all at once. The columns moved. I realized too late they weren't just light, they were solid, shaped like spears, and they struck with the speed of a thrown blade. The first wave of creatures was impaled where they stood, their bodies disintegrating into ash before they hit the ground. The smell of scorched air filled my lungs. But the assault didn't stop. From the upper shadows, more shapes poured in, larger this time, their limbs tipped with hooked claws. My vision blurred, the energy draining me as quickly as it came. I couldn't keep this up. The girl glanced over her shoulder, eyes wide, not in fear, but in urgency. "You have to let go," she said, her voice trembling. "If you don't, it'll burn you out." But when I tried to pull back, I couldn't. The crystal wasn't letting me go, and somewhere deep in the roaring hum of the cavern, another voice emerged, low, patient, and cold. "We are not finished with you." The voice wasn't in my ears. It was inside my skull, deep and steady, vibrating through bone like an echo that had always been there. "We are not finished with you." The girl's grip on my arm tightened. "Fight it," she shouted, but her words were swallowed by the rising hum, now more like the roar of a storm trapped in stone. I tried again to pull free, but the crystal's surface had liquefied around my hands, warm, viscous, and unyielding. My heartbeat no longer felt like my own. It matched the rhythm of the mark's burning pulse. The pale-limbed creatures shrieked from the edges of the cavern, but none dared cross the spears of light still jutting from the floor. They circled instead, their black eyes fixed on Minot, on the girl, not even on the crystal. Then the mark flared white-hottened. My knees gave out. I collapsed against the crystal, my forehead pressing into its surface. Images slammed into my mind in quick, blinding flashes. A sky I'd never seen, cracked with rivers of molten light. Towers of black stone leaning inward, their spires chained together like prisoners. A doorknow, a gate ringed with symbols that pulsed like a heartbeat, and behind it, a presence so vast and cold that my chest seized just trying to comprehend it. The girl's voice cut through, sharp and desperate. "Cole, don't look at it." But it was too late. The presence had noticed me. The crystal's pull became irresistible, like gravity turned liquid. My body lifted off the cavern floor, my boots dangling inches above the glowing veins. The girl leaped up, trying to hold me down, but the force yanked us both upward. The cavern blurred around us, the walls bending inward until they became streaks of light. My ears popped, my stomach flipped inside out, and every bone in my body vibrated like a struck tuning fork. Then silence. I wasn't in the cavern anymore. I stood barefoot on a black plain that stretched forever under a sky swirling with violet clouds and silver lightning. The air was cold enough to bite, and the ground shimmered faintly as if it were made of glass. The girl was gone, and something massive was moving in the distance. It wasn't walking, it was approaching. The horizon rippled like heat over asphalt, though the air here was cold enough to sting. Each tremor brought the approaching shape closer, its outline forming slowly against the violet clouds. At first, it was impossible to judge its size, too far away to be clear, too massive for my mind to fit into any scale I understood. The ground shuddered beneath my bare feet. Thin cracks spider-webbed outward, glowing faintly with the same white-blue fire that had bled from the crystal veins. My mark burned in perfect rhythm with those pulses. It was aware of me, not just my presence, but me. Every thought, every choice, every moment I had lived. The sensation was invasive, intimate, like someone leafing through a diary you didn't even know you'd been keeping. The shape resolved into something wrong. Not an animal, not a machine, not even a shape that belonged. In the category of alive, it shifted as I looked at it, edges bending away from my focus, surfaces rearranging to avoid definition. At times it looked like a titan of fused armor and bone. At others, a spiraling cathedral of glass that breathed like lungs. You took what was mine. The voice was not sound, it was weight. The air pressed harder against me with each word, my ribs creaking under invisible pressure. I tried to speak, to tell it I didn't know what it meant, but the moment my thoughts formed, it laughed. The laugh was low and endless, vibrating through my teeth like machinery deep underground. The gift was not for you. It came closer, and with each step, the world around it warped. Clouds condensed into spirals, lightning froze mid-strike. The glass ground bent upward like waves of an ocean. My knees buckled under the shifting gravity. Somewhere behind me, faint and far away, the girl's voice screamed my name. The sound was distant, like hearing someone shout through 10 miles of fog. The thing lowered itself, its formless mass folding into something vaguely human-shaped, those still wrong arms too long, head tilting too far, eyes burning white. Return the bond, it said, and for the first time, the words sounded almost impatient. The mark flared again, brighter than it ever had before. My entire arm went numb, and a deep, twisting ache curled up my spine. I realized then that it wasn't asking, it was demanding, and if I refused, something far worse than death was waiting on the other side of that choice. The thing's shadow swallowed everything, stretching far beyond the horizon like a blanket of night. My lungs burned, each breath a fight against the crushing gravity it exhaled. The mark seared like molten iron, my arm trembling from the sheer force of its demand. Somewhere in that pressure, the girl's voice broke through, not distant this time, but sharp and desperate, like she was right beside me. A flash of light cut across my vision, and suddenly she was there, her small frame braced between me and the towering mass of shifting form. Her skin shimmered faintly, the same hue as the crystal veins that bled light into the ground. She didn't speak to me, she spoke to it. The sound she made wasn't language, it was raw vibration, something that felt older than stars, older than time itself. It was a defiance that carried teeth. The thing recoiled, but only slightly, as if she'd shoved against a mountain and it had decided to humor her. The bond belongs to the seed, not the vessel, it replied, voice like tectonic plates grinding. You are not its keeper. The girl turned to me, eyes wide not with fear, but with a kind of furious resolve that didn't belong in something so small. Her hand gripped mine, and in that instant the mark stopped burning. It wasn't gone, it was different. The ground beneath us split open, revealing the same blue-white fire that had haunted every step of my journey here. But now, instead of swallowing me, it surged upward, wrapping around us like armor. The pressure from the thing above intensified, but the light pushed back, a hurricane against its suffocating weight. You will break, it warned. Maybe, I said, the first words I'd managed to speak without choking since it arrived, but you're going to bleed first. The bond, whatever it truly was, ignited. It wasn't just light, it was will, the combined force of my choice and hers. The world bent in on itself, a deafening roar swallowing the sky. The last thing I saw before everything turned white was the girl standing in front of me, hair whipping in the storm, teeth bared like a predator ready to kill for its pack. And then there was nothing.